A little boy looked straight into the eyes of the people who had come to rescue him and refused to leave. No one understood why an American child was clinging to a German woman while armed soldiers waited only a few feet away. The officer believed he was about to uncover something deeply wrong. Her neighbors feared she had risked everything for the enemy. But the boy only shook his head through tears before speaking 7 simple words that silenced everyone. "She saved me. Please do not hurt her." In that quiet moment, the line between enemy and family simply disappeared. To understand why, we have to return to a morning when neither of them expected to survive another ordinary day. The war was ending, but peace had not yet arrived. In a small German village scarred by months of uncertainty, Anna Keller woke before sunrise out of habit rather than hope. The little farmhouse felt painfully quiet. Every morning, she still placed a second cup beside the stove without realizing she had done it. It had belonged to her son. Outside, damp spring air drifted through broken apple trees, carrying the scent of wet soil and distant wood smoke. She wrapped a faded gray shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch. No church bells, no wagons, only wind moving across empty fields. Then something unexpected interrupted the silence. Not an engine, not marching boots. A child's voice, weak, frightened, calling for someone who never answered. Anna stood motionless. For a moment, she wondered whether exhaustion had begun playing tricks on her mind. The voice came again, closer. She followed the sound beyond a collapsed stone wall until she saw a small figure sitting beneath an old oak tree. The boy's clothes were covered with dust. His face was pale. One trembling hand clutched a worn leather pouch against his chest as though it contained everything he had left. He looked up. His eyes were filled with fear, confusion, and exhaustion. Neither of them understood the other's language. Yet both recognized something that needed no translation. Loss. The boy struggled to stand but collapsed after only one step. Anna hurried toward him, slowing only as she reached his side so she would not frighten him. She knelt and quietly held out both hands. He hesitated, then placed his small fingers into hers. They were ice-cold despite the mild spring morning. Together they walked toward the farmhouse, stopping whenever his legs grew too weak. Every few yards he turned to search the empty road behind them, as though someone he loved might suddenly appear. No one did. Inside, the familiar scent of rye bread and chamomile tea welcomed them into a home that had forgotten laughter. Anna pulled a chair close to the stove and motioned for him to sit. He obeyed quietly, never releasing the leather pouch. While the kettle warmed over the fire, she stole careful glances toward her unexpected guest. His jacket was far too large for his narrow shoulders. One sleeve carried a small American flag almost hidden beneath dried mud. Only then did she realize who he was. An American child. The discovery settled over the room like winter returning without warning. Old memories rushed back, letters that had stopped arriving, an upstairs bedroom that remained untouched, a framed photograph she could no longer bear to face. Every reason she had ever found to close her heart forever. The whistle of the kettle pulled her gently back to the present. She filled a small basin with warm water, found a clean towel, and carefully wiped the dirt from the boy's face. He watched every movement with quiet uncertainty. Then his lips trembled. "Mom." The single word needed no translation. Anna rested one hand lightly on his shoulder. "I'm here," she whispered, knowing he could not understand the words, but hoping he might understand the kindness behind them. She offered him a cup of warm tea. He wrapped both hands around it, letting the warmth slowly return to his fingers. Next came the last piece of fresh bread. Anna sliced it carefully into thin pieces before placing the plate in front of him. The boy looked at the bread, then at her. He waited. She smiled and nodded once. Only then did he begin to eat. Not quickly, not desperately, carefully, like someone who had learned that every meal might be his last for a while. A sudden knock echoed across the farmhouse. Anna froze. Looking through the window, she recognized her neighbor Marta standing outside. She quietly stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. Marta wasted no time. American patrols were searching every road. A young boy had become separated from an evacuation convoy during the confusion of a retreat several days earlier. Soldiers were carrying his photograph from village to village, hoping someone had seen him. Anna remained silent. Marta studied her face before glancing toward the farmhouse. Understanding arrived almost immediately. "You found him," Anna still said nothing. You cannot keep him here, Marta whispered urgently. The Americans will think you kidnapped him. Our own people will call you a traitor. Anna looked across the orchard where apple blossoms continued opening as though the world had never gone to war. He is only a child. Marta sighed. Sometimes frightened children bring the greatest danger. After her neighbor disappeared down the narrow lane, Anna remained outside for another minute before returning indoors. The boy had finished only half his bread. The other half rested neatly beside the plate. He smiled shyly and pushed it toward her, inviting her to share. Anna stared at the simple gesture. Years earlier, another little boy had done exactly the same thing across this very table. For the first time in many months, the silence inside the farmhouse no longer belonged only to grief. It belonged to both of them. Morning light spread slowly across the kitchen floor, turning the old wooden boards a soft shade of gold. The boy had fallen asleep in the chair beside the stove, his head resting against the folded blanket. Anna stood quietly for a moment. Then she reached into an old cedar chest and lifted out a thick wool quilt that had once belonged to her son. Her hands hesitated. She had not touched it in years. At last, she gently draped it over the sleeping boy. He stirred slightly, but did not wake. Outside, the village slowly returned to life. A wagon rolled somewhere beyond the orchard. A rooster crowed in the distance. Ordinary sounds. Yet each one reminded Anna that ordinary life had become dangerous. News traveled quickly in a village this small. Secrets traveled even faster. She quietly gathered what little food remained in the pantry. A few potatoes, one onion, several dried herbs hanging from a wooden beam. Enough for soup if she stretched every ingredient carefully. As the pot simmered over the fire, the boy slowly opened his eyes. For a brief moment, confusion crossed his face. Then he remembered where he was. His first instinct was to reach for the leather pouch. Anna pointed toward the table. It is safe. He did not understand the words, but he understood the gesture. Relief softened his face. Carefully, he untied the worn leather strings. Inside rested only three things. A faded family photograph, a small wooden airplane with one chipped wing, and a silver pocket watch that had stopped long ago. He lifted the photograph first. Pointing to himself, he smiled faintly. Then he pointed to a woman standing beside an American soldier. Finally, he pointed toward the empty doorway. His smile disappeared. Anna lowered her eyes. She gently placed one hand over her heart, then slowly pointed toward the morning sky. The boy watched her for several silent seconds. He nodded. Neither of them needed words. Grief spoke every language. A little later, while washing bowls beside the window, Anna noticed fresh tire tracks cutting through the muddy road. Military vehicles. Recent. She remained at the window until the distant engine noise disappeared. Without saying anything, she quietly closed the curtains, lowered the flame beneath the soup, then looked toward the boy. Somewhere nearby, people were searching for him. Tom was running out. That afternoon, the rain finally stopped, leaving the garden behind the farmhouse washed clean. Anna picked up a small basket and motioned toward the back door. The boy looked uncertain. She smiled, then pointed toward the garden. A few moments later, they knelt together among rows of young herbs pushing through the damp soil. Anna carefully pulled away weeds before handing him a small wooden trowel. He watched closely, then copied every movement, patiently, without being asked. Before long, the basket held parsley, tiny carrots, and several green onions. The boy proudly lifted the smallest carrot toward Anna as though he had discovered buried treasure. She laughed. The sound surprised even her. It had been many months since laughter had returned to that garden. As evening settled over the village, dark clouds gathered once more. Rain began tapping softly against the roof. Back inside, the soup filled the farmhouse with warmth. The boy pointed toward himself. Tommy. Anna smiled. Anna. He repeated her name carefully. Anna. She laughed again, then repeated his. Tommy. The tiny exchange felt strangely important. Two strangers. Two different languages. One shared beginning. Moments later, the distant rumble of engines rolled across the hills. This time there were several vehicles. Tommy's smile disappeared. He immediately grabbed the leather pouch and looked toward the window. Anna quietly lifted the curtain. Military trucks, moving slowly from house to house. Lanterns glowed through the rain as soldiers spoke with frightened families. She lowered the curtain. Tommy searched her face for answers. She had none. She simply reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. Together they listened as the engines grew louder. Then came the sound of boots. Closer, closer still. A knock echoed across the farmhouse. 3 slow knocks. Tommy flinched. He looked toward Anna, then toward the pantry. His breathing quickened. He remembered the shouting, the confusion, the day he had become separated from the convoy. Every uniform now looked the same. Every soldier felt frightening. Before Anna could react, Tommy ran. He slipped into the narrow pantry and pulled the door almost completely shut, leaving only the smallest crack to breathe through. Anna hurried after him. "It's all right," she whispered instinctively, even though he could not understand. She reached for the pantry door. Tommy shook his head desperately. Tears filled his eyes. He was terrified that if anyone found him, he would lose the only person who had made him feel safe again. Another knock echoed through the house. Anna closed her eyes for one brief moment, then walked slowly toward the front door, praying she would somehow find the right words before fear made the wrong decision for both of them. The knock came again. 3 slow, steady taps against the weathered front door. Anna took one quiet breath before opening it. 2 American soldiers stood beneath the steady rain. Their uniforms were damp with mud, their faces lined with exhaustion rather than suspicion. Behind them stood an older officer. He removed his cap politely before speaking. Anna understood only fragments of his English. "Missing. Boy. American." He carefully unfolded a waterproof photograph and held it toward her. It was Tommy, smiling beside the same woman and soldier she had seen in the faded family picture. Anna looked from the photograph to the officer, then back again. For one brief moment, she considered pointing toward the pantry immediately. Before she could speak, she heard the faint scrape of movement behind the pantry door. Tommy, still hiding, still terrified. The officer watched her expression carefully. "Have you seen him?" Anna searched for the right English words. She knew only a few. She paused. The sentence would not come. The officer waited patiently. Anna gently pointed toward herself, then slowly spread her empty hands. She was trying to explain that she did not understand enough English. The officer gave a small nod. He understood the language barrier. His eyes wandered quietly around the farmhouse. Everything looked ordinary. A warm stove, fresh soup, simple furniture. Then he noticed something else. 2 bowls sat on the wooden table, one large, one unmistakably sized for a child. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not suspicion, curiosity. Anna followed his gaze. She knew exactly what he had seen. The officer looked back at her. Neither spoke. Rain continued falling softly between them. Finally, he smiled politely. "If you remember anything." He touched the photograph. "Please tell the next patrol." Anna nodded. "Ah, yes." The officer thanked her and turned away. The soldiers followed him down the muddy path toward the neighboring farmhouse. Only after the sound of their boots faded did Anna slowly close the door. She leaned against it, letting out the breath she had been holding. The pantry door opened just a few inches. Tommy's frightened eyes appeared first. Only when Anna smiled did he step out. She knelt beside him. "No more hiding," she whispered gently, though she knew he could not understand the words. Tommy lowered his head. He looked ashamed. Anna lifted his chin with one finger and smiled again. She wanted him to know he had done nothing wrong. He had only been afraid. That night neither of them slept well. Tommy woke several times, listening for engines that were no longer there. Anna remained awake beside the kitchen window, watching moonlight settle across the empty road. She knew the soldiers would return. This time they would search more carefully. The following morning dawn arrived wrapped in pale mist. Anna stepped outside carrying a bucket, pretending to begin another ordinary day. She could feel eyes watching the farmhouse long before she saw anyone. Tommy stood quietly inside the doorway. The little wooden airplane rested in one hand. He smiled as a robin landed near the vegetable garden, hopping across the wet grass without any fear at all. Anna smiled back. For one peaceful moment, the war seemed very far away. Then the engines returned, louder than before. Several military trucks rolled to a stop directly in front of the farmhouse. The same officer stepped down first. This time he was accompanied by several additional soldiers. He walked toward Anna with the photograph still in his hand. Before he could speak, Tommy saw him. His body stiffened. Fear flashed across his face. Instinct told him to run back inside. Instead, he looked at Anna. She slowly knelt until their eyes met. With a gentle smile, she placed one hand over her heart. then pointed toward the officer. Finally, she softly nodded. Tommy looked from her to the soldiers, then back again. He searched Anna's face for several long seconds. If she trusted them, perhaps he could too. Very slowly, he stepped out onto the porch. The officer froze. His eyes widened with relief. Tommy, the boy looked at the soldiers, then turned back toward Anna. For a heartbeat, he could not move. Finally, he ran to her one last time and wrapped both arms tightly around her waist. Tears filled his eyes. Anna held him close, then gently brushed the hair away from his forehead. She smiled. This time there was no fear in her expression, only encouragement. Tommy slowly let go. He wiped his eyes, turned toward the officer once more. Then, gathering every bit of courage he could find, he pointed toward Anna and spoke 7 simple words. She saved me. Please do not hurt her. Silence settled across the farmhouse. No one moved. No one spoke. The officer lowered the photograph. Piece by piece, everything became clear. The warm soup, the child's bowl, the blanket, the garden, the frightened boy who trusted a stranger more than anyone else. It had never been a kidnapping. It had been kindness. The morning remained perfectly still. Even the wind seemed unwilling to interrupt what had just happened. The officer looked at Tommy for a long moment before slowly kneeling until they were face to face. His voice was calm, gentle. We've been looking everywhere for you. Tommy nodded, but he did not move. Instead, he reached for Anna's hand one last time. She squeezed it softly. Then she smiled. A quiet smile that asked him to be brave. Tommy looked into her eyes. He understood. Very slowly, he walked toward the officer. Halfway there, he stopped, turned around, ran back. He wrapped his arms around Anna once more. She held him tightly, closing her eyes for only a heartbeat before gently letting him go. Go home, she whispered, although he could not understand the words. He understood the smile. That was enough. The officer stood and removed his cap. For several seconds, he simply looked at Anna. No translation was necessary. He placed one hand over his heart, then bowed his head slightly. It was not a military salute. It was something far more personal. A quiet expression of gratitude from one parent to another. Anna answered with the same gentle nod. Around them, the soldiers remained silent. They had arrived expecting to recover a missing child. Instead, they had witnessed something none of them would ever forget. One young private quietly stepped forward. From his field pack, he removed a neatly folded wool blanket and placed it on the farmhouse porch. Another soldier set down a small sack filled with canned food, flour, and fresh bread. No one spoke. No orders were given. Kindness simply answered kindness. Tommy climbed into the waiting truck. Before the door closed, he reached into his leather pouch. He pulled out the little wooden airplane. Pressing it gently against the window, he smiled at Anna through tear-filled eyes. Then he pointed toward her, touched his own heart, and smiled again. The convoy slowly disappeared down the muddy road. Anna stood on the porch until the last truck vanished beyond the hill. Only then did she return inside. The farmhouse felt quiet once more, but it was no longer the same silence. On the kitchen table rested the empty cup Tommy had used only moments before. Beside it lay a small folded piece of paper. Anna unfolded it carefully. Inside was the faded family photograph. On the back, written in careful handwriting she could not yet understand, was an address in England. She smiled. Very gently, she placed the photograph back inside the leather pouch. One of the soldiers noticed. He stepped back onto the porch, pointing first to the photograph, then to the address. He smiled warmly. Anna understood. She handed him the pouch. If. She searched for the only English word she knew. Family. The soldier nodded. I promise. He accepted the pouch with both hands before returning to the truck. As the convoy disappeared into the distance, Anna quietly looked down at something still resting in her own hands. Tommy had forgotten the silver pocket watch. She smiled softly. No, she whispered. I think you wanted me to keep it. She placed the watch inside the small wooden drawer beside her late son's quilt. Years passed. The orchard bloomed every spring. The farmhouse slowly filled with life again. The scars of war faded from the village, though they never disappeared completely. Anna never married. She never expected anyone to return. Helping Tommy had never been a bargain. It had simply been the right thing to do. 30 years later, on a warm afternoon, an old blue sedan stopped quietly outside the farmhouse. A tall man stepped out. Beside him stood a young girl carrying a bouquet of white daisies. The man paused at the garden gate, looking around as though every corner held a memory. When Anna opened the front door, he smiled. She recognized him almost immediately, not because of the years, but because of his eyes. "Tommy," he nodded. "I finally found my way back." Neither hurried forward. Some reunions deserved silence before words. Then Tommy crossed the garden and embraced her exactly as he had done when he was a frightened little boy. When they stepped apart, he introduced the young girl beside him. "This is my daughter, Emily." Emily handed Anna the flowers. "My father told me you taught him what courage looks like." Anna accepted them with trembling hands. Together they sat beneath the old apple trees until evening settled across the orchard. Tommy reached into his jacket and removed the silver pocket watch. Its hands were moving again. "I had it repaired," he said with a smile. "It kept reminding me that one day I had to bring it back." He gently placed it into Anna's hands. "This belongs to you now." Anna looked at the quietly ticking watch, then at Tommy. Neither of them needed to explain what it meant. For years it had measured something far greater than time. It had measured gratitude. As the evening sun slipped behind the orchard, Emily watched the two of them sitting together beneath the blooming trees. She finally asked the question she had wondered about all afternoon. "Dad, why did you come all this way?" Tommy looked toward Anna before answering. "Because when I lost my family." He paused. "A stranger chose to become one." The watch continued ticking softly between them. Steady, quiet, like the kindness that had begun inside a small farmhouse decades earlier. History remembers battles. Families remember love. And sometimes the greatest victory is simply choosing compassion when fear would have been easier.